One of the most famous cartoons of all time was a strip called Pogo. And the most famous line of that cartoon strip was when Pogo, the character, said at a moment, "We have met the enemy and he is us." I keep thinking about that line when I watch Barack Obama on the world stage, as increasingly his behavior seems to reflect the view that America is the enemy, or at least the problem in the world, and that we not only need to make endless apologies for who we are and what we do, what we believe, and how we behave, but we need to take corrective action in order to endear ourselves to some very dangerous and very unsavory people. Call it the Pogobama worldview, and I think it's a problem that we've got to come to grips with. Let me give you some examples of the way I think it's manifesting itself. The first is the release of these so-called torture memos, in which senior, thoughtful, and I think very professional lawyers in the United States government provided the president and his subordinates their best advice about what could be done to shock, without permanently harming in any way, some of the most hardened and disciplined terrorists in the world, so as to get them to give up information they were withholding when exposed to more gentle or normal interrogation techniques. These so-called enhanced interrogation techniques were far from torture, as David Rifkin and Lee Casey have written in the Wall Street Journal this week. You clearly see that the fact that we have subjected thousands of American servicemen to these techniques is part of their training to deal with what they might face if captured by enemies of this country. With the permission, with the acknowledgement of the Congress, clearly these techniques could not be construed as torture. Are they harsh? Yes. Were they necessary? Absolutely. As CIA Director Michael Hayden, former CIA Director Michael Hayden, and former Attorney General Michael Mukasey pointed out in the Wall Street Journal last week, these techniques were absolutely effective in preventing further attacks against the United States. So what has President Obama done by releasing these memos? I'm afraid he's not only invited the prosecution of their authors. Oh, I know, he said that he wasn't going to prosecute them, but he certainly has set the stage for other people to do so. And whether they're Spanish judges or whether they're the inquisitors of the U.S. Congress, or whether they're the International Criminal Court, or whether they're perhaps the ACLU, you can bet that both the authors and quite probably the people for whom they wrote the memos will be seen as candidates for the dock by somebody. And that's not good. That's not good for those in the previous administration who were doing their duty as they saw it, who were responding to requests for their best advice from the president, and who were serving their country at a very difficult and dangerous time. By the way, it's not good for the Barack Obama administration either, because it's got lawyers right now who are writing similar memos about whether the attacks by Predator drones, which might kill innocent civilians in Pakistan, are in fact legal or not, or whether attacks on today's Barbary pirates in Somalia are legal if they wind up not blowing up terrorist camps or pirates. Those people could be in the dock in the future. And mark my words, if the precedent is established now, they will be. Another example of what's the Pogobama kind of program here is, of course, the massive cuts that are being made in our defense budgets. We're watching as the president and his defense secretary, Robert Gates, do massive damage to specifically the kinds of capabilities that enable this country to project power around the world. The C-17, our foremost airlifter, the F-22, the best fighter attack aircraft in the world, the Future Combat System. The Army has been laboring for years to bring to fruition and to modernize its aging and increasingly obsolescent armored forces. And you have the FA-18, which is going to be truncated with, I think, clearly the threat to the carrier battle groups that it forms the backbone of their air wings. The Obama administration is signaling that it's going to cut back on carriers, a critically important part of, again, our power projection capabilities. Missile defenses are going to be ravaged at a moment when we're seeing more and more people flying more and more threatening ballistic missiles. And not least, we're watching the defense industrial base that supports all of these things, including, by the way, our nuclear deterrent, withering away, literally atrophying, especially if these programmatic cuts are implemented, perhaps to be sold off, as has happened in the past, to some of our enemies who wish to build the very things that we're no longer willing to build. Another problem, of course, is the matter of sovereignty. The president has taken a very forward-leaning view, shall we say, on treaties that would sap our sovereignty, on universal jurisprudence and theories that, like Lilliputians strapping down Gulliver, would apply lawfare to this country in ways that will be very harmful to our future ability to act in our own defense. And he's also, of course, appointing people like Harold Koh to be the senior State Department lawyer, man who is rabidly in favor of sovereignty-sapping treaties and, of course, also universal jurisprudence. These are very ominous signs at a time when we've got to be, I think, enhancing, shoring up, protecting our sovereignty, not sacrificing it. And finally, there's this business of about appeasing our adversaries. The world tours that the president has taken, first in Europe, to Turkey, and then to Latin America most recently, are sort of an endless litany of apologies for what the United States has done or been or stood for in the past, and supplications to people who think much the same way and who wish us ill. And all this does, of course, is legitimate their criticisms of us and reinforce their confidence that we will reward them for the very worst of behavior in which they increasingly engage. So whether it's Vladimir Putin and his kleptocracy in Russia, or whether it's the incipient nuclear mullahocracy of Iran, or the megalomaniacal Kim dynasty in North Korea, or the Muslim Brotherhood and its Sharia-adherent fellow organizations around the world, the president seems to be going out of his way to try to accommodate their demands in whole, or certainly in part, and to demonstrate that the United States is no longer the adversary that it once was, and that they properly have feared, and I think in most cases respected. This Pogo-Obama worldview and program, if you will, I think bodes very ill for American national security interests and for ultimately the security and freedom of each of us. I think we've got our work cut out for us in the face of a president who so clearly embraces this worldview, and it's time we get about resisting it in every way we can. Thanks for listening.